All right, so let's talk about failure. We all have a relationship to failure. It's impossible to go through life without experiencing failure of one kind or another. But before we get into the video, let's start with a definition so we can kind of be all on the same page about what it means. Obviously, it's not too complicated. Failure is the opposite of success. It's failing to achieve the expected result effectively. A lack of success, or perhaps the omission of the expected or required action. So, you set up an expectation to do things in a certain way or whatever it might be, and then you failed on delivering and in what you're expecting to execute. And so there's lots of different ways that we can presumably fail. So what's interesting about all of this is if we look at the context, now that we have the definition, our particular context tends to be sports or esports performance in particular. So let's look at it from that point of view. So firstly, failure is a really interesting one because failure is a result, again, of having an expectation and then not meeting that expectation. So you're trying to win the game, that's the goal, and your expectation is you're going to win the game. And that's, it's kind of obvious. You have to have that expectation that you're going to win, because if you have an expectation as a player that you're not going to win, that's stupid. You're not going to play like nearly as well. You're going to, and this is actually interesting from like a psychological point of view, because what happens there is that the expectation of success is you sort of framing your kind of worldview around achieving success. So what happens when you, let's say, encounter an obstacle or a challenge or a difficult problem, something that could be a barrier to that success, instead of being less resilient and just being like, well, my expectations actually I'm going to fail anyway. So, you're going to have less resilience to those issues and you probably will fail. That's because you're kind of confirming the worldview that you have, that you're not expecting to succeed. And so we need to, as competitors, we need to expect that we will win. And this is the interesting thing, because a lot of people have brought up to me in the past when I'm talking about outcome orientedness to say that, how can you believe that, you're going to be the best player? How can you believe sometimes that you're going to win? And the thing is that we have to not look at our belief in the outcome. We have to understand, how do we project the outcome from our capacity? And so this is an interesting idea, because in a previous video, I talked about how confidence in performance tends to be an emergent property of preparedness, of doing all the things that is required of you to make sure you're very competent in all your fundamentals. You've worked really hard. You're up to date on the meta. You've got all of these experiences that you've gathered over time that confirm that you are as good as you think you are. And that helps to bring confidence into the match. Now, that's really vital, and it is extremely vital that therefore we expect to succeed, not because we think we're going to win per se, but because we understand that we have the capacity to, and that is the thing that we are trying to achieve. And things can happen out of our control, but we are expecting still to win, even though we understand that we're not sort of fully in control of the outcome, if that makes sense. So we need to try to bring this into a more internalized process in that way, where we're kind of looking inside of ourselves and saying, okay, how do I perceive this situation? How do I perceive my goals and expectations? Because you have to have goals and expectations to challenge yourself and to be able to push yourself beyond where you're kind of currently capable. That's what it is, because typically to achieve something, typically for most people, means that you've done something a bit better than what you've ever done before, normally. Because if you continue to just achieve the same thing, it doesn't really feel like an achievement anymore. And so failure is often, about, did I succeed in growth? Because that's usually the metric that we're always looking at. Let's say you're at your job, for example, and you're trying to, get to higher positions. I mean, that's how most people are going to think of success. I'm rising up the ladder. I am making progressive improvements. I am getting paid more over time. And I'm getting paid more over time because I'm learning to produce more value over time. And so if I in any way create a break where I'm breaking downwards, and so I'm regressing as opposed to progressing, now that feels like failure, because my expectation is that over time I'm going to continue to improve, and that will help me to get my raise and various things like that. And so it is obviously an expectation that we will continue to improve as we play. So if you're in a situation where you're looking to get achievements, but you're just staying static, you're putting more, more and more cumulative time in. So that doesn't feel very good. So it feels like you're failing. And so this is all to say that one of the very important things about how we understand our relationship to failure is understanding, firstly, perspective, because how we perceive the failure is everything. Because failure is either a data point for you, in understanding that as a competitor, failure is a necessary part of succeeding. It's a necessary part of growth. And if you're growth centric and not outcome centric, then what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking through that lens. You're going to be confirming that worldview instead of any other. And so I talked about that earlier. So if you're not expecting to win, well, you're actually going to be more likely to lose by having that mindset. If you're expecting to win, you'll be able to have more mental resiliency when you meet challenges because you know that you have the capacity to overcome and to improve through the obstacle. So here, what we want to make sure that we are doing is, as we're oriented instead around growth and we're not oriented around, winning in the game, we are able to then see that actually, if we zoom out, failure is a part of success. It's actually the same thing because you cannot have success without failure. I mean, can you? Can you have success without failure? It's much the same as can you have, light without dark type of thing. I mean, maybe I shouldn't go again. Why do I keep going to physics? I should really stop doing this. I'm in no way qualified to do that. But my point is that when you zoom out, you're able to shift your perspective and recalibrate it in a way that serves you more. Because what we want to do is we want to empower ourselves in growth because we can control the growth. And so with failure comes more data. With more data comes more abilities, more opportunities to improve from the data that you've gathered. So actually, failure is exciting because failure is a part of progress and growth. Failure is only a problem and should only be, you should only feel negatively towards failure if you do not have the right tools to use that failure as a lesson to grow. If you cannot transfer that experience into a growth potential, that can then be pursued through your practice, now you have a problem. So this is why it's so important to be able to have that capacity to over time become better at analyzing yourself, because then you're going to be pulling more data that you can then obviously leverage more into your own improvement as a player. So that's the first thing. We need to realign our perspectives in a way where we are saying, I'm excited to fail, because failure isn't failure. Failure is just more data. And with more data, I get to grow. And you need to look at the time horizon. This is the second thing, really, that adds into the perspective point. You need to look at the time horizon. Now, we don't know how long we're going to be, I don't know, what kind of player you are, whoever is, viewing this video. Maybe you're someone that is at the start of your pro career. Maybe you're someone that's at the start of your playing career completely, and you're, a very new and don't have any skills yet, but you've decided that you really want to engage with this process of becoming really, really good and trying to get it to the pro level. Maybe you're somewhere in between. It doesn't really matter. You can still have a sense of the time horizon insofar as let's zoom out from all of the experiences that we are having on the day-to-day basis. Let's not think about those. Let's think about 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 2 years. Now, any given day when you're playing, you may feel very upset by the results that you have on a given day. But again, if you zoom out and you think about how long it really takes to see big improvements, especially the better that you get, because the gains slow down over time. This is called diminished returns. What you're going to be able to see instead is, oh, actually, this is just a day where I didn't play as well. And what useful information is here? Is there something that I should change about my process? Is there an interesting scenario that I encountered that I need to look more at? If you have the mind to use the experiences, and this is maybe built within your process in a way that is going to help you to grow, now failure becomes really cool. And you become much more excited and curious as a player, which means you'll try more things, as opposed to what tends to happen over time to people that, let's say, have a negative relationship with failure. where you'll start to just tighten up and you won't learn new things because you're in more of a state of kind of fear and anxiety, as opposed to that kind of open, vulnerable, curious, and sort of very courageous state where you're excited and looking to try to just like figure stuff out. I want to fail. I want to fail quickly, and then learn from those failures. If you're not able to kind of get out of your patterns because you're set, because you're kind of afraid a little bit, and you care so much about the outcome, you're going to be giving up that feeling of freedom to experiment and to try things and to change, because you're too caught up in just getting the wins and feeling like you're improving. Improving will happen if you have a correct process. You don't need to feel the improvements. If you have a good process, it's happening. If you have a good process, you're taking care of like all of the different pillars of your performance. Okay, let's talk about pillar number one, like mechanics or technique. The ability to shoot stuff with the mouse and move with the keyboard at the same time. Your mechanics. Are you taking care of your mechanics? Are you finding ways to do something every week that helps you to improve on your mechanics? And this can be like one small thing. We don't need to just take all of mechanics. I mean, that's not really how we learn to improve quickly with complex skills. You want to pick certain things you've noticed that may be troublesome for you. Okay, cool. Okay, my ability to, let's say, do one bullet burst and just like, well, let's take the crouching example, the crouch spray example. I need to get rid of the crouch spraying. And so I'm just going to, I've decided to try to do that within my 20-minute warm-up block before that I play. I'm going to focus on like a bunch of DMs where I'm just like never crouch spraying. Maybe I unbind crouch. Maybe I try like a different way to do that. But you figure it out and you try stuff. And you put your conscious focus on trying to fix that skill. Okay, well, let's take another pillar. Okay, let's say decision-making or theory, I suppose, would be maybe a better way to categorize this bucket. And because within theory comes decision making and many other things too, like being able to analyze the game and all the rest. So what are you doing to work on your decision making? What is there within your process every day that you have that can help you to have some level of focus around decision making? Well, it could be very simple. And I've talked about this in a few different videos, where lots of different approaches to reviewing VODs. This could be one way you could do it. And with, you could either review full VODs if you're brave enough to do that, because it is kind of an undertaking if you don't have much experience. And I question the amount of value that is good for when you're a newer person that doesn't have a lot of experience doing it. I mean, you don't know what to look at. There's just like too much oftentimes, which is why most people don't get into a demo viewing habit, because when they're younger players, it's just very intimidating to find a good way to approach it. So you can, like, one of the things I usually suggest to people is just use one of these programs like Shadowplay or whatever, where you can press a button and it will capture the last, however many seconds you want, and so that you can review rounds or scenarios or plays, like, and you could do that a few of those, right? So at the end of the day, you can say, okay, I'm always, after I play, I'm going to just review the 3 clips of 60 seconds that I took from today, for example. And in those clips, my goal is to look at them and I highlighted those for a reason. So perhaps there is something about my decision making that I would change, or perhaps I was unsure about a play. And you're actively engaging with each clip to understand what is the focus out of this clip. Do I understand something too poorly? Is that why I made a mistake? Should I be doing like a different behavior? What kind of situation is this? Is this an aggressive scenario? Is this a defensive scenario? What are my goals in this particular clip? Am I supposed to play passive, aggressive? Am I supposed to play, retake? Am I supposed to play for my life? Trying to understand like what's really going on and actively engaging this way will help you, because next time you're playing, maybe tomorrow, you might be in a similar situation and you'll be able to kind of more quickly sort of categorize it and figure out what are the appropriate plays that I should be doing here. And then it's a process that will continue to evolve, but you want to keep your brain involved in these processes. So those are two of the 4 buckets. Now, number 3 is the mental stuff. And with the mental stuff, typically the way I build this in, as I've mentioned previously too, is by having something between the warm up and the actual playing, where you're setting your mindset. You're creating this kind of agreement with yourself of like, this is the frame I'm going to play in. This is how I'm going to sort of set up my mental. This is how I'm going to respond to challenging situations. Maybe some teammates drop out of the match. Maybe you have some really irritating teammates. Maybe something happens. Let's say I'm playing 1v1 and something happens in the game that's very tilting, which in 1v1 games happens pretty often. And you decide how you react to it. You can make a decision saying, I will never give up on myself. And what that means is anytime something happens that would frustrate me, I have like a mechanism. Maybe I slap myself on the thigh, and I forget what this is called, but it's like essentially kind of like a physical priming or something like that. People in sports use this, where they are able to kind of encode a certain sort of association between something and the feeling of like hitting themselves or whatever, slapping themselves on the thigh. I think I learned this when I was reading about a famous tennis player a long time ago, that he would do this, where he was sort of playing tennis, and if he kind of made a whiff or whatever, messed up, basically made a mistake. Instead of thinking about the mistake and engaging a mental process with the mistake in the moment, which is something that commonly happens to all of us in any performance realm, to help him just like stay focused, has that slap on the thigh. And what that slap on the thigh means is, I made a mistake. That's awesome. That means I'm like one step closer to getting better. So you kind of just, basically, it's kind of like the Jocko Willink good thing. If you guys are familiar with that reframing video that I made ages ago using Jocko Willink's good as a way to talk about this. And, with that particular instance, now you've created a mechanism that if you are experiencing a problem in the mental game, you've got some kind of a solution you can try. And so there's lots of different types of solutions. Maybe it's reframing, maybe it's understanding, I've got to understand and learn my triggers, but something that helps you to recognize that this is part of your performance experience, the mental game. So what are you doing about it? What are you noticing about it? What emotions are you feeling when you're playing? What do you notice is a correlation between something happening in the game and making you perform worse because you feel worse? You're always experiencing emotions in the game in some degree or another. So what is that? Is it indifference? Are you feeling nothing? Well, that's a problem, because if you're feeling indifference and feeling nothing, well, now like you're not going to be as creative. You don't. If you're feeling indifference, is typically an indication you don't care. So that is obviously not going to could be conducive to playing well. Similarly, if you feel negatively, well, that is like, what kind of negative are you feeling? That's bad. If you're feeling positively, that's great. Why are you feeling positive? Like start to try to get granular with these things. Try to notice them. Try to understand what they mean, because they're all data points that will allow you, as you build a fuller picture of yourself and yourself as a performer, as a competitor, it allows you to use this like data over time, that when you become a more experienced player, stuff will start to click, more things start to click, and you'll start to be able to find solutions in a way that is even more intuitive and is generally better, because you've done the work, you've done the research on yourself in all of these scenarios. So there's data always to be had for you, essentially. So, and then the fourth and final bucket would be the physiological aspects. So understanding how that impacts your performance is really important, because let's say you do have a negative emotion in the game. Well, let's say you slept for 2 hours and, your parents yelled at you for some reason, or let's say, someone stole your car. There's lots of reasons why you could feel stressed, or you could feel agitated or more irritable or have less focus, because you're not as physiologically in an optimal place, because all of these things obviously take a toll. Because what is our currency, or I should say, what is our fuel for our main performance driving kind of factor? It's our energy. Our energy is necessary for us to have focus and attention. That is the very first thing that we use to do anything. We need to be able to focus our attention on things. And if you can't focus your attention, you can't pick up information. If you can't pick up information, you can't make decisions, because the game is all about reacting to the information. And the more that you can pick up, the better you can process it. So the better your attention and focus is. You're going to have a way better ability to be super dialed into the game and get into the zone. But what you'll find is, if you're operating from, let's say 50-60% capacity on an energy point of view, and your focus is diminished and your attention is diminished, then it's going to be impossible to hit your A game. You're only going to get into your A game if you have a good physiological state, if you're well rested or rested well enough, and you're in a position whereby you, for whatever reason, are able to have like really peak focus and attention. Now, one thing I will say though is that you'll find that people who are playing tournaments, because of the pressure and so on, the adrenaline kind of bumps you up, so that if you are having, let's say you are quite tired, the adrenaline can actually really make up for that, and sort of the stress of that situation can give you kind of a boost. So that, but obviously that's not a day-to-day thing, and generally speaking, it should always be the case that you're trying your hardest to make sure that you're physiologically really, really well prepared for the match, so that you don't have to even think about that. But these are the four major buckets I would say that constitute performance. So my question is, what are you doing about each of them? Because if you have a process that includes all of these things, that allows you to gain ground as a player on all of these things, then you're always going to be growing, always. And so the outcomes don't even matter, because the outcomes will take care of themselves. The score will take care of itself. I think that's a title of a book that I've probably read at some point. The score will take care of itself, by Bill Walsh. Okay, the score takes care of itself. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. That's the mentality we want to have, because this is the thing. Someone asked me on my Discord, or actually no, it was a YouTube comment. Yeah, they were saying essentially, and I've covered this point already. How can you have this belief that you're going to be the best? Without like really any evidence, to really show that. And it's interesting, because it's like I said previously, to deal with the failure and to deal with the outcomes and the expectations and the goals and all these things that you do have to have, you need to make sure that you understand that it's just, you have the capacity and you have the confidence that because I have the capacity, if I put everything into this, I know I can be a pro. And that's what I want to do. So it's more about, what do you want to become? That's more what it's about, because you have likely the capacity to become that thing. So it's more a question of, what are the characteristics that I have to adopt as a person? Well, if I want to be an athlete, like a professional athlete, I have to train like a professional athlete. I have to think like a professional athlete. I have to do all these things. If I do those things for long enough, I will become a person who is a professional athlete. And when we're thinking about the outcomes, well, okay, am I assigned to a pro team? Am I making good salary? All the rest of these things. Those things, I mean, these are small details ultimately, because this is the most meritocratic field that can exist. Sports. It's the closest thing that exists in the world to a true meritocracy. It's sports. And so if you are good enough, then it will take care of itself eventually. People will notice. Now, last thing I'll say on this topic actually is, social intelligence is a very important aspect to also be concerned with, because if you're really good and people like you and think that you would be good on a team because they like you and you're likable and you work well with others and you can communicate well with others, you're emotionally intelligent, you understand how to be empathetic, you understand how to make other people feel like visible and heard, and you understand how to have a discourse with them, even if it's a confrontational discourse, but one that's probably necessary. If you can navigate these social environments, if you can make sure that you are able to have it be the case that everyone in the community thinks that, oh, this guy's great, I'd love to play with that guy, then you've done a great job. And now if you are good enough, it will happen eventually. You'll get on a team eventually. You'll get a contract eventually. Now, I will say also that esports is highly, highly, highly competitive, partly because of the nature of how easily accessible it is. Anyone who has a computer and an internet connection can obviously feasibly live this dream, as opposed to with sports where, maybe you need to be living in the right place, the weather, the physical condition, like there's so many other limiting factors. In esports, it's so easy to get started and to start competing that I think makes it very, very competitive. But again, like if you want to do this, if it's a value, if it's a thing that you want, go for it, and understand that failure is really something that is inevitable, and we should be excited about it. I want you guys to get excited about failure. And again, this is the way I'm going to cap off this video. I want you to get excited by failure, because I want you to understand your growth process so well that when you do fail, it just feels good. And one thing I will say is that, of course, if I fail 1,000 times in a game or something, yeah, that's a bit overwhelming at that point. You do need to select the failures that you think are the most critical, or are the ones that you can learn from the most. Again, we're playing the long game with this. This is the long game. Zoom out. Zoom out when you look at this. As another example of this, and something that helped me a lot, was when I started to learn poker, because I was trying to become a pro poker player. and I've told this story a bunch of times, but I realized that in poker, what was very interesting is that the reason why you need to not be outcome oriented is because when you're trying to apply a strategy in poker, especially if you're playing online poker and you're playing lots of tables and all this kind of stuff, and you're playing for long periods of time, it's more of a massive sample size that you're looking at to determine success. And what you have to do is you have to stay consistent with the strategy over a sample size of hundreds of thousands of hands. That's a lot of hands. That's a lot of playing poker. That you and you will only know if you're actually hitting the mark if you're able to stay consistent with that strategy. And with poker, a lot of the time, it's about the mental game that will allow you to stick to it or not, because there's so many things that will happen that will try to break you away from it. So again, like if you're losing money, that's fucking sucks. No one likes to lose money. Everyone has a reaction to losing money. Well, say everyone. Obviously, there are certain people that have different, their brains work a little bit differently than us, people that are definitely outliers in that way. But the average person is going to have a reaction to losing money. And it's going to make you go into that negative, fearful, anxiety-ridden framing where you become more risk averse. And then all of a sudden, a game that is all about applying a strategy, which tells you how to take risks, now you've betrayed it. You've betrayed it at this point. So you either have to stop playing or you have to find a way to recover. At the very least, you have to recognize when you hit that frame, and you have to be disciplined enough to control it. All of these things apply to what we're doing as well with esports. So again, I said to cap it off like that was going to be a very short thing, but it's ended up being a kind of a longer thing. So anyway, I hope that you guys are able to be excited about failure, because it means that you can grow. And without failure, you can't grow. So you better become best buds with failure, because it's never going to be something that is absent from your life. All right. Hope this was a enjoyable video. I'll catch you guys later. Thanks.